You think you know the person you share a bed with until a small detail refuses to sit quietly in your mind. Mine was a handwriting sample, and the way my wife signed her name like she was trying to remember it. I'm not a dramatic guy. I manage a small marine supply store off Highway 7, the kind of place that sells bait, anchors, rain slickers, and thermoses you could brain a bear with. We live in a gray shingled rental, a 10-minute walk from the harbor me, my wife Elise, and a lab mix who answers to Captain when he feels like it. This is a coastal town that looks pretty on postcards and smells like low tide 4 mornings out of 5. Elise is a nurse. Night shifts, day shifts, shifts that blur. For most of our marriage, her job was the reason our schedules didn't line up, which meant our marriage ran on notes, fridge magnets, and faith. You learn to measure love in leftovers and staggered alarms. People joked we were ships passing in the night. I laughed because I didn't mind being the ship. The first thing that went wrong wasn't a fight or a confession or even a missing ring. It was a form from the DMV. Our landlord finally decided he loved us enough to let us paint the living room. Big romance, I know, and I needed to renew my driver's license before renting the sander. I sat at the kitchen table, tapping through online forms, when Elise slid her renewal across to me. "Mind double-checking?" she asked. She knew I'm weird about details. I skimmed the line's address, height, weight, then stopped at the signature. She had written Elise Hannah Klein, a neat, tidy script, then deleted Hannah with a tiny practiced slash and signed Elise Marie Klein over it. I raised an eyebrow. "Middle name swap?" She laughed. "Habit. My mom used to call me Hannah when I was little because she loved that name. Slipped. It was a harmless everyday thing. I forgot it. For almost a week. Then the hospital called one afternoon because her emergency contact number bounced. I gave them her cell. The clerk thanked me and confirmed the patient's name. "Elise H. Klein?" "H," I repeated. "As in, Hannah?" There was a pause, office noise crackling through the line. "That's what we have on file." I didn't think much of it until 2 other little things lined up. A prescription bag with a stapled label Elise M. Klein. A social media profile where her middle initial was AH. I wouldn't have noticed if she hadn't flinched just slightly when I said her full name out loud the second time. People don't flinch at their own names, unless they're new to them. You collect these moments because you don't know what else to do. A box of reasons you don't open. I told myself it was nothing. Then I opened the box. It was Friday night we'd ordered Thai, and Captain had chosen to be a loaf of bread on Elise's feet. She ate quickly, checking her phone between bites, fingers moving in that thoughtful way you use when the person on the other end matters. She smiled without meaning to. Then she set the phone face down like a reflex. I said, "Long shift tomorrow?" "Yeah." She didn't look up. "Double." The lab sighed. The house hummed. The rice stuck to the container. Ordinary life held its pose like a portrait. After she fell asleep on the couch, I carried her to bed. The phone buzzed on the coffee table. I didn't pick it up. I just stood there, watching the screen light the room like a tiny private lighthouse. A message previewed. "Meet you by the pier. Usual place." No name, just a number. The preview doesn't show everything, you know that. But you also know enough to feel your blood move differently. I didn't answer the message. I installed a cheap GPS tag on the undercarriage of her car the next afternoon while I pretended to look for a dropped wrench. It took 5 minutes and 10 years off my dignity. I told myself I needed facts. Facts are what men like me can carry without drowning. Saturday night at 10:13 p.m. The dot on my phone drifted away from the hospital and slid toward the harbor. She parked near Dock 4. 10 minutes later, another dot my own pulled into a darker lot behind the bait shop. I killed the engine, zipped my jacket, and let the cold pick at my ears. The pier was mostly empty. A shrimp boat canted against its ropes like it had thoughts. A man leaned on the rail 2 slips down from where Elise stood. He wore a cap with the brim pulled low and carried himself like he hoped no one would think he was hiding. He wasn't young, but had that notch-hardened posture ex-military guys bring back from places they don't talk about. Elise hugged him like you hug someone whose shoulder you've memorized. Not a kiss. Not movie bold. Something worse, familiarity. I almost said his name aloud, though I didn't know it. They spoke quietly. He handed her a small padded envelope. She tucked it into her coat. He left first, a quick glance over his shoulder, steps absorbing into the night. Elise stayed, pressing her palms on the railing like the wood could steady the world. After a minute, she walked to her car and drove home the long way, like she was timing herself. I followed at a respectful distance because I wanted to keep something, if not my pride, then at least the element of watching without exploding. Back at the house, she showered. I heard the water run too long for a fall night. Then she crawled into bed, hair damp, the same woman I had loved through winters and taxes and the dog's stomach emergencies. I lay awake, eyes open. When people say betrayal is a knife, I think they mean this. Not a sudden stab, but a pressure under the ribs that keeps you from breathing right. The next day, I said nothing. The day after that, I said less. I watched her brush her hair into a knot and tuck something into her purse with a gentle care she didn't use for anything I owned. On Thursday, I found the padded envelope under the recycling bin, empty, but for a single folded note the size of my palm. It said, "Next time, same place. Tell him we're close." No signature, no number. If you asked me to describe the handwriting, I'd say it was unremarkable, confident, average, the kind people learn in 6th grade penmanship and never unlearn. That neutrality made it more unnerving, like a face you forget as soon as you look away. That night, I made spaghetti that tasted like twine and asked carefully, "You ever think about moving?" "From the house?" She twirled a fork. "Why?" "Just imagining new places." I tried for casual. "New names." Her fork paused. "New names?" "People reinvent themselves," I said. "You sign Hannah sometimes. The hospital thinks you're Hannah. Your pharmacy thinks you're Marie." She set the fork down with a sound that felt like punctuation. "We're really doing this?" "I don't know what we're doing," I said. "That's the problem." She looked at me for a long time like she was measuring my edges. Finally, "I had a rough childhood. You know that. My mom used different names to get us into schools. It stuck. It's not a conspiracy. It felt like one on the pier." She didn't blink. "You followed me? You made me wonder." She leaned back, tired more than angry. "I meet with a grief group by the docks," she said. "Families of overdose victims. The church rents the bait shop after hours. There's a guy from the VA who helps coordinate. We swap envelopes because not everyone wants their names out there. It's cash for a mom whose son needs a bus ticket. It's normal." "That's why you couldn't tell me?" "Because you'd look at me like this." She gestured toward my face. "Like I'm someone you need facts for." I wanted to believe her. I could even see it. The town did things like that. Quiet kindnesses that looked shady when you photographed them. But the tone of her answer rubbed wrong against the grain of my instincts. It wasn't just what she said. It was the practiced way she spoke to make the whole thing sound dull. We slept on opposite cliff edges that night. In the morning, she made coffee the way I like it. Too strong, clattering spoon. She kissed my cheek like you reassure a child. "I'm working a double," she said softly. "Don't wait up." I didn't wait up. I drove down to the pier at 9:45 and parked in the shadow of the fish market sign. A different man met her this time. Tall, neat beard, wearing a jacket too thin for the wind. The envelope changed hands again like a relay baton. I stepped out of the truck because there's only so long a body can hold a question without seeking an answer. "Evening," I said. They both turned. Her face saved surprise for later and fast-forwarded to anger. "Ben, go home." The man's eyes flicked past me, cataloging exits, a hunter seeing the lines of a field even after it was harvested. He nodded once, like we were colleagues, then merged into the gaps between streetlights like smoke. "I wanted to meet your grief group," I said. "Shake a hand. Commiserate." She hugged herself against the wind. "Stop, please." "Then help me stop." I held up my own hands, empty and stupid. "Tell me the name of the group." She didn't. "If you don't trust me," she said, "maybe you should follow me again until you do." It was cruel in a polite way. She got in her car. I didn't try to block her. I watched her taillights disappear into the town like they belonged there, and I didn't. The next day, I typed the words, "Peer Grief Group, Bait Shop Church" into a search bar. I got recipes for fish stew and a 7-year-old fundraiser article. When I called the church office, an old man told me the basement was booked Tuesday nights for AA and Wednesday mornings for quilting. Nothing about the pier. When I asked the bait shop owner, he said he closed at 7 p.m. sharp. He squinted at me like I was asking whether he sold ghosts by the pound. Something else happened that week. A man with a government haircut bought a spool of nylon rope at my store and asked me in a casual voice where a person might launch a small skiff without the harbor master noticing. I laughed like he'd told a joke and asked for ID. He smiled and said the rope was for a cabin porch swing. He didn't buy bait. That night I waited for Elise to sleep and opened the small locked file box under our bed. It had our passports, insurance cards, her nursing license. I stared at the photo on her license, not the face I kissed, but a firmer version, a jaw squared by resolve. The license said Elise M. Klein. The passport said Elise Marie, too. But tucked behind the passport was a laminated card with a photo from 5 years earlier, when her hair was shorter and she still wore that cautious smile, the one she had before the town softened her edges. The name on the card was Elise Hannah, not a random old ID, a legitimate hospital badge from St. Francis in a city we never talk about. I'm not proud of what I did next. I wrote the hospital name in my notebook, drove 2 hours inland the following Tuesday, and walked into St. Francis like I was delivering flowers. The volunteer at the desk was the sort of person who assumes the best of you. "Can I help you?" "I'm looking for someone who used to work here," I said. "Elise, 5 years ago." I smiled like a man with good news. The volunteer typed slowly. "No Elise Klein on record," she said. "We have a nurse E.H. March from that time, though." She looked up, pleased with herself for finding a near match. "Sometimes people switch names when they get married." "Right," I said, and left so fast I knocked the corner of the brochure rack with my hip. I didn't call Elise. I drove back with my hands clenched like I was trying to keep the steering wheel from telling anyone what my face looked like. At home, I walked the dog without a leash and pretended the sky made sense. When Elise came in from her double, she smelled like antiseptic and cold air and something sad. She saw my face, sat down at the table, and folded her hands like a student waiting for a test. "Okay," she said softly. "Ask me." "Who are you?" "Elise. Who were you?" She stared at our fridge magnets like their meanings could help. Finally, "I had another last name once." She said it like a line she owed. "A long time ago. It isn't a secret I kept to hurt you. It's a secret that kept me alive." My laugh came out wrong. "You're making it sound like a spy story." "It's uglier than that," she said, "and smaller." We stayed up until 3 a.m. while she told a version of the truth that fit sideways into my head. Years before we met, she worked at a hospital in a city 2 hours west. She blew the whistle on a surgeon skimming drugs, high-grade opioids under patient names. He had friends, and those friends were not poor. "Witness statements disappear," she said. "Credentials get revoked. People move. I change departments, then cities, then names. The state protects you. but it doesn't tuck you in at night. The men at the pier? Middlemen, she said. A charity with no name. Sometimes the state hires private help for relocation. It looks shady because it is, not criminal protective. The envelopes. I shouldn't have used them, but it keeps people safe who don't have time for paperwork. You could have told me. She looked so tired I wanted to carry her again, like the first month we lived together. I tried, she said, and every time I rehearsed it, I rehearsed your face finding me dangerous. I believed her in the way you believed the first version of a truth because you want it to be enough. For a few weeks, we named a truce. We slept close, cooked one new recipe, talked about maybe driving up the coast for a day off. The tracker on her car pinged less. Captain forgot the tension first and began bringing her his nasty rope toy to celebrate the return of peace. Then winter came down in one hard week. The harbor froze at the edges. 2 nights of wind knocked the town sideways. Generators woke up inside garages like old men coughing. On Wednesday morning, Elise left early, kissing my forehead and whispering, "Don't forget to salt the steps." The last thing she texted was a photo of coffee in a styrofoam cup with a crooked smiley face drawn on the lid. She didn't come home that night, or the next. At 2 a.m., my phone buzzed with the tracker app. Device offline. Last location, Old Mill Road. The dot sat where the pavement turns to gravel, and then to path, and then to marsh. The sheriff found her car in a ditch, a clean slide, no skid marks. The passenger door stood open to air that chewed the lungs. A single padded envelope lay on the front seat. Inside, a blank card. No note, no handwriting, just white. People disappear in 2 ways in towns like ours. They run, or the water takes them. The water didn't confess. The search dragged the marsh with hooks and found only the objects the marsh wanted found. A shopping cart, a bicycle without handlebars, a cathedral of reeds. The sheriff asked me careful questions. Did she have enemies? Did she use? Did we fight? I said the right things. I left out the pier. On the 3rd day, I told him everything. He frowned in the way professionals frown when they dislike coincidence. He wrote witness on his pad and underlined it until the paper nearly tore. He asked for names. I had a surgeon's last name and a hospital. I had middlemen. I had a man with a cap and a man with a neat beard. I didn't have their names. He asked about the envelopes. I said they were blank. He asked me if I thought she was alive. I said yes because I needed to keep a version of hope that looked like belief. The 4th day, a man with a government haircut sat across from me at the kitchen table with his hands folded in the way of a person who studies procedures. He introduced himself as Pierce and set a card down without a phone number. "We consult for certain cases," he said, "where state protective processes intersect with complications." "Complications," I repeated. "Your wife cooperated with an investigation. She also obstructed some documentation by using cash transfers and third parties." He sounded like he had memorized the word also as a way to line up phrases that didn't like each other. "We encouraged her to stop making unsanctioned deliveries." "Why didn't you tell me any of this?" I asked. "Because you didn't need to know," he said politely. "And we didn't trust you." I wanted to throw the card in his face. I kept my hands quiet on the table instead. "Is she alive?" He didn't answer. He glanced around the kitchen like the room might overhear and tell someone. "If we had definite knowledge," he said, "we'd coordinate with the county." He slid a small envelope across the wood as if it had been burning a hole in his pocket. "If you find this, you'll know she made it." "If I find what?" He tapped the envelope once. "You'll know." After he left, I opened it. Inside was a key small brass, stamped with the number 27. No tag, no bank name. I held it up to the light like a treasure map might develop in the air. It did not. A week later, the harbor thawed. The town returned to pretending it hadn't held its breath. I kept my key and my grief like things I didn't want to put on a shelf. Then, one evening, Captain found something wedged under the porch step. He worried it with his teeth until paper tore. A postcard. On the front, a lighthouse I recognized north of here. 2 states up the coast. On the back, one line in unremarkable handwriting. When you're ready, ask for Locker 27 at Ballard Marina. I read it 3 times, thinking of how easily you can become someone you weren't built for. A man who looks at docks and sees secret compartments. A husband who learns his wife like a pattern of evasions. A person who believes postcards with impossible timing. The postmark was 4 days old. The handwriting might have been hers, or it could have been printed by a hand that practiced being average. I drove up on a Thursday under a cheap sky that promised rain. Ballard Marina sits in a tourist town with overpriced chowder and boardwalk shops that sell shells imported from somewhere shells don't want to be. The woman at the office glanced at the key like she wanted a better story and handed me a clipboard without commentary. Locker 27 waited in a cinder block row that smelled like wet rope and the kind of dust that never leaves. Inside, a duffel. Inside the duffel, 3 things. First, a burner phone, new inbox. Second, a manila folder with copies of statements Elise had given years earlier, the surgeon's name, the patient list, a timeline in her careful nursing script. Third, a cheap spiral notebook I recognized. Elise's grocery list style, except instead of eggs and detergent, it contained dates and locations faintly masked as supply deliveries. Pier, church lot. The words Marley pay his rent appeared 3 times. A kid? A code? She had been doing charity the way you smuggle yourself out of a locked room piecemeal, careful, cash. Between pages, a photograph slipped out a candid of Elise on our back steps last summer, laughing at something I'd said, head tipped back, a string of lights over her shoulder like cheap constellations. On the back, 4 words, "We don't get forever." The phone powered on. 1 contact, P. No messages, no call history. I didn't press the button, not because I'm noble, because I'm a coward who wanted one more night of not knowing. I checked into the motel across from the marina and sat on the edge of a bed that had the give of institutional memory. On the TV, a weather map pretended to care about me. I pressed P. A man answered on the first half ring. "You're late," he said. "Who is this?" "Pierce." "You gave me a key," I said, "and you chose to use it." His voice softened. "That means you're ready to hear something ugly." "I've had a steady diet." She left because staying meant a kind of death we don't mark with services. She left because you started to look at her like a case file. My throat made a sound that tasted like metal. I just wanted the truth. "People who say that rarely mean it," he said gently. "They mean they want a truth that doesn't change who they get to be." "Is she alive?" There was a long, bureaucratic silence. "Stop asking me to sanction grief with a stamp," he said. "Think like her. She wrote the note so you'd find the things you already knew. She wanted you to choose. If you call this number again, we'll change it. If you go home and hide the folder in a wall, no one will bother you. If you keep following the envelopes, you'll learn how much a person can lose and still call it living." The line died. The phone did that small, indifferent click that suggests the world has gone on without you. I drove home the next morning with the duffel on the passenger seat like a sullen witness. The town didn't look changed. The harbor wore its morning light like nothing bad ever happened under it. In our kitchen, Captain lay where Elise used to leave her shoes and made a small noise when I kissed his head. I put the folder behind the false panel on the hall closet that she thought I didn't know about. The key I hung on a nail under the back steps, because some talismans should live outside the house. 3 weeks later, the sheriff called to ask if I had come into any new information. I said no because the words Locker 27 felt like a spell I didn't trust in someone else's mouth. He thanked me in a voice that stubbed its toe on the fact that cases go cold. On a Wednesday that smelled like rain and low tide and paint, A woman I'd never seen before came into the store and bought 2 rain slickers and a coil of rope. "You're Ben," she said, saying my name like an apology. "Yeah." She wanted me to tell you the things she couldn't say without making you chase. She picked at the price tag like she needed something to do with her hands. "She loves you, but she's not coming back the way you want. If she did, both of you would end up smaller than you already are." "Who are you?" "Someone whose son didn't die because of her." She placed a folded receipt on the counter. "And because you didn't stop her." After she left, I unfolded the receipt. On the back was that unremarkable handwriting again. "Please give Captain an extra year, even if you don't feel like it." I stared at the words until the letters swam. Please give Captain an extra year. The smallest possible request and all I could carry. Here's the part of the story where I am supposed to tell you whether I drove north again, whether I found a woman standing at a lighthouse, whether we embraced in the salt air and found a new name to write on forms. I could give you that. I could make myself heroic or wise, but the truth is smaller and uglier and, I hope, more real. I didn't go. I made coffee and salted the steps when it iced and taught Captain not to bolt when the door creaked. I kept the folder where I could reach it and chose not to read it on nights when the house sounded like it needed a person. I left the burner phone charged in a kitchen drawer and turned off. Sometimes I hold it the way you hold an artifact that belongs to a civilization that never wrote anything down. A letter arrived last week addressed in the same neutral hand. No return. Inside, a photo of a marina that wasn't Ballard, different light, different shape of boats. A woman stands at the end of a dock with her back to the camera. She could be anyone. She could be no one. On the back, we don't get forever, we get choices. I pinned it inside the closet where my jackets live. I don't look at it every day, but sometimes I do, and I let the fact of it rewire my anger into something I can use. People ask me now, when they think enough time has passed to be unhurtful, "Do you think she cheated?" I could say yes and be done. I could say no and sound like I'm living in an improved fiction. I choose a different answer. She chose a thing I didn't know how to stand next to. Maybe that's infidelity's truest shape. At night, the tide slaps the rocks, and the wind leans on the east side of the house. I fall asleep with the dog's feet pressed into the backs of my calves, and wake up to a kitchen that needs sweeping. I am learning how to love things that stay, and how to leave the door unlocked for truths that might arrive without asking my permission. It isn't heroic, it isn't cinematic, but it's living. And if one day I find a postcard with a different lighthouse and a key stamp 28, I'll make a new, small decision. I'll decide whether knowing is worth the person it would turn me into. Until then, I'll keep a bowl by the door for Captain's leash and a space in the closet for a duffel that smells like wet rope and choices. If this story pulled you in, if it made you ask what you would do with a blank envelope, a burner phone, and a key please like the video, subscribe, and turn on notifications. I share more grounded first-person psychological stories where love, trust, and fear collide. Your support helps these stories find the people who need them.